Hi everyone. So today Sarah and I are meeting for the last time. And when I say for the last time, I mean it's the end. Our series of conversations has come to an end. But I don't think it's the end, as in like we're never gonna talk again. She's never gonna show up on my YouTube or whatever. I think we are going to get together. It's just that for various reasons, it sort of came to a natural end. Like we always knew that we came to it with completely like like open books. We didn't know how long it's gonna last. We didn't have a number of conversations that we were going to do, and that's gonna be the end. I, from the start, had a sense that we would just both know when there was time for us to move on, so to speak. And so we wanted to meet today to kind of like reflect not just on the year, since the year is coming to an end, but also reflect on the conversations that we had and this connection, and as a way to sort of wrap it up. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Yeah, it's so sweet to be with you. And yeah, I'm excited to reflect back. It's wild to think. I mean, we started our conversations. I think we actually got in touch like about mid-year or a little bit in springtime. And so a lot of this year has been in conversation with each other. Uh,
Yeah.
and just like documenting sort of our journeys personally and with each other through having these conversations. It'll be really fun
Hmm.
too to like keep like returning back to like, oh, remember
Yeah.
fall when this is what was coming up. And yeah. So thank you everyone
Yeah.
for like being with us in this journey and like exploring. Like I think that's the word that Maggie and I used when we met each other, when we kept diving into these 4 hour long conversations that like we actually like didn't actually get to an end of, and we're like, we should just record and then
Yeah.
yeah, and that there's just like this open, ongoing exploration. Like that's the kind of energy that I think we carry through all of our conversations, which is really fun, especially in a time when a lot of people have answers. I love that we
Hmm.
had more questions. And like we often, like even if we thought we had a little bit of an answer, like it was disrupted next week. And yeah,
Maybe not.
yeah, maybe not. Like, oh, maybe that insight was just the next layer of the thing. And then, so yeah, I've been like humbled and learned a lot
Yeah.
through this. Yeah.
Big time, big time. And actually, I mean, I was kind of, I haven't had a chance to actually like sit yet to reflect on this year. I think you and I were talking, we never actually got to do a recording about this, but one of the things you and I kind of talked about a little bit was actually how things kind of evaporate and move through. You know what I mean? So it's kind of
Yeah.
actually, it actually takes an effort. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm obviously just also speaking for myself that, things can be very intense sort of in the moment, and something can be sort of, palpable and important and everything. But it's like, it doesn't matter if it lasts a day, a moment, an hour, or even a few days, but it moves through, is what I'm trying to say. And one of the metaphors that Sarah used, which I loved, and I'm probably gonna spoil it, but I think it was like a rubbish chute or garbage
Yeah, like a
chute.
trash. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that like a lot of actually what's like going on even throughout the year, like again, it can feel like even intense in a moment, something can come up and then boom, it's gone. But like once it's gone, it's really gone. Like nothing lingers, like after that. Um, so I don't want to like imply that like every like like I said, something can be intense even for like a week, or two or something. It's like it doesn't matter. But the point is that the way it's experienced sort of moves through. So then by the time say a month passes or two or three, and then it's kind of hard to, I don't know about you, but like it's hard to actually reconstruct and like remember what it was about, or like what were the details. So you actually have to like make an effort to remember things. Would that be something that
Yeah.
similar?
Yes. And I think the way I describe that too is I didn't realize how much of our memory is like built on our um, emotional memory, like the things that are stuck in our bodies, right? And I think about like some of the big memories I have from my childhood that always stuck with me, that were like the hardest things that I lived through. And
Mm-hmm.
when actually like facing them and feeling them and sitting through them, right? Like you kind of feel like you're loosening that energy and it does start to move. But for some of those big memories, it takes time, a lot of time. Maybe for me, I've had to sit with some of those memories for years until it started to really move. But yeah, once things are moving and there's more of that like sense of um, the solidity of that emotional memory isn't stuck in the body in the same way, then it can feel like a trash chute. It can feel like literally like the emotional energy comes through and it just like, and then it's just like,
Yep.
um,
Flush.
yeah, but
Like a toilet on a plane. It just does this like
yeah,
gone.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like it feels really like aliveness, which is like what we talked about before too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, still I have like emotions that like will stay for a while, and like just I'm with because there's like just I'm sitting with and sitting. So it's not like all these emotions are like coming through like quickly, but it's like some things are being processed for a day, 2 days, and
Mm-hmm.
then when they're going, it does feel like it feels like all the cliches of like, okay, yeah, like literally just let it go.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah.
But I actually think this is a really important distinction that you just made in that because there's like memories and memories, there's the sort of ongoing situations throughout the year or month, a week that sort of very much kind of just come and go, come and go. It's like an ongoing flow of things and the ever changing kind of the human experience basically, the sort of, and that's what I mean. That some things may sort of be processed for a little bit, but generally speaking, there's an energy of things moving through and not getting stuck as much, like as opposed to like before the realization, right? But that it doesn't mean I think that like the when the memory, unconscious memory, is getting triggered, that's what I mean. I think, right? Like the
Yeah.
difference between if let's say there's like a bit of an argument or like a little disagree, a little clash that moves very quickly. Like I mean, at least for me, this is very different in that like I can have like a little even disagreement with Steve during the day, my partner, and like 5 minutes later, I know I genuinely don't even remember what that was about. I mean, that's literally the rubbish shoot. That's how long it lasts. But it's very or like remembering like what was something about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Like it just doesn't sort of stay. Doesn't have like the staying power is what I'm trying to say. But when something hits the memory, unconscious memory, or unconscious wound, or unconscious association, that especially if it's like for the first time, you see it for the first time, boy, that, I mean, you're gonna be sitting with this, at least I've been sitting with this, it can be for days, and sort of wait. At least the way it is now is like I just have to sort of just be with it and wait until it sort of shows me what it's about. So
Yeah.
that memory is yeah, this is a very different to like the sort of day-to-day remembering. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess with that, even this last week, like I had something come up and I could feel like because it's like a new feeling in the body or like a new situation that I'm in, putting words to it too soon like slows down or it can confuse the process, right? So, because it's like you're feeling new things. And for me, I think that's something like, yeah, I've learned with the ability to like sit with things longer and longer and just like allow it to be what it is. sometimes still though you're in a conversation with someone, you're trying to like to give it structure. You're being like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
how I feel. I'm trying to share what I
Mm-hmm.
feel. And I was talking to someone earlier this week where like, oh, like I just needed one more night of processing. And the next morning my body could feel clearly what it was. It had a sense of like, this is what I need, or this is what's actually needed in this moment. But until that clarity arises, I know there's a passage, I don't know where my Tao Te Ching is, but there's a passage in the Tao Te Ching that talks about like, can you wait till the muddy waters settle? And I think that so much is like what all this is about. Like, can you have the patience? You know, a lot of it is just like the fortitude, the ability to sit until that muddy water settles, because there isn't clarity of, how to act or what needs to be done until
Mm-hmm.
at least some of that sediment, the things that have been kicked up, has the chance to find its place. And I think that's so much of like navigating, sometimes we have to respond on a timeline, so we don't have the
Mm-hmm.
luxury of waiting till things
Mm-hmm.
settle. But a lot of times it feels like you actually have more time than you realize, or you can ask for more
Yes, that's true. Yes, yes, yes.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's something, even just in the last week, yeah, that I'm just like appreciative of like, also like just being in relationships with people now where I can talk about that kind of stuff, where I can be like, yesterday, like this is kind of what was I was feeling, but actually I got clarity today, and this is actually what I really need or want. And yeah, be in that
Yeah.
process.
Actually, speaking of reflections of like the reflections that I already kind of am aware of, about this year, because I'm gonna definitely sit at like sort of over Christmas and New Year and I have a proper sort of looking back, and reflecting on it. But it's totally related to what you're just saying. I think to me this has been one of the greatest um I suppose insights. I don't know even how sort of illumination. I don't know, but something around this clarity that you're speaking of. In that I noticed that I used to be very heady, So for example, when again, nothing wrong with it. I'm still kind of heady, but slightly different to how I used to operate. And so, for example, whenever there would be a distress of any kind that I was experiencing, I would sort of sit and analyze it to death and try to kind of like force clarity is probably the best way I can describe, sort of work at it, sort of push it, force it. It really felt like, hard work. And I think what's definitely changed that I noticed this year, throughout the year, in various situations that were kind of challenging or intense, is that all I could say at the beginning was like, I'm upset, something was triggered, whatever. That's all I could communicate because that was the only thing that was obvious to me. And then I literally just had to sit, Sarah. Like I literally just, I couldn't, my brain could not do what it used to do in the same way. It was more about just being with the discomfort and quite literally waiting until it shows me or something comes up and reveals. And then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see it now. Or like, so that's been for me being this heady and that headiness that I'm speaking of, like causing so much psychological turmoil for me, like the way my brain worked. It just doesn't do it anymore. And there's something else that just about giving that time that I could see the value of giving something time, like just, yeah, just giving something time to see what this is actually about. Because even after giving a little bit of time, which I thought was enough, I only was like sort of clear, but not really. But you know what I mean? So that was incredible just to see that. And also it's kind of tied to what it means to speak like your truth and how that is tied to that clarity. You know, I can't still convey it because this is like something that I feel that came through a lot this year, but I'm only getting familiar with it and all in a new way. And also, I'm not quite sure like how to speak about it yet because it's part of the things that I have to still reflect on. But I can just say that the two go together. That when there is this clarity that doesn't, that when you see through your own projections, when you see through your own wounds playing out, and you get to see something clearly, and it's your truth, you know, then it's so much easier to communicate it, even when you feel wobbly.
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy some tutorials in a minute because it's like it's been massive this, but I can't yet convey because it's not about stubbornness. It's not about I'm right, you're wrong. You know, it's not about convincing anybody to my truth. It's not about changing anybody's mind. No, it's just it's actually when it stops when it's undefended, then I know that I'm speaking from that clarity and from that my truth. When it's like I genuinely don't need even the person to understand. Like I really don't expect them to even understand that or to accept that or to agree, but I still have to say it, you know, because that is my truth. And then yeah, so it's again, like I said, to me this is so fresh because it's yeah, but to me, there's huge link between that clarity and speaking that. So yeah, I would love to hear more from you on that.
Yeah, I think that's been a huge one for me this year too. I think I came into this year actually like with some conversations that were really difficult with someone who in my life said their truth, but their truth was said very unkindly.
Right.
And it really shook me because they said they were staying in their truth and they were speaking their truth. And to them, that was their truth. But to me, like the language that was used,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
way that it was conveyed, there was kind of like jabs in there, like personal jabs and things like that, that weren't true about me. And I was like, well, they can say it's their truth, but it's also not true about me. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to hold that because then I had to, like you said, get into my truth
Yeah.
because I think that's like the challenge too. When someone else in our lives is like holding their truth, can you hold your own? And can you hold that we have different truths? And that's a lot of what we've talked about over the months is like holding two truths, holding multiple truths, and being able to be in a place where you don't need these things to like merge with each other. Like
Mm-hmm.
two opposite truths can be true at the same time. And I think even like with our personalities, like we recognize like we're very different personalities and coming together in conversation in a sense is like two truths being in conversation because like the way that we see this realization is very similar, but we also come from different angles. And so that was like the
Totally.
beauty
Yep.
beauty
Yep.
of our conversation was like we kept feeding each other because we have this difference of like our backgrounds and like our journeys. And so there's so much beauty that can come from that difference when you're just like holding that truth without needing to defend it.
Yeah.
And you said, but at the same time, I think what I learned this year too was in some of the situations I've like gone through, I've learned a lot about the intimate details of relationship in terms of conflict, repair,
Mm-hmm.
rupture, when it's time to like come together, when it's time to do our own work in our own time, which you and I have worked through too, like the times when like things have come up that when the muddy waters have come up and then we just needed to like have them settle in our own
Yep.
bodies.
Yep.
And then the times when like where you're in your own truth, like for me, like this came up for me in the last few weeks, like being in my own truth and not being defended, but protecting myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like a subtle difference too, because like for folks who maybe like me, we're very unprotected, sort of and very open to the world and sort of like
Mm-hmm.
in that helper mode where you're kind of like helping everybody and then
Right.
allowing everybody into your world and wanting to like anyone who come to you for something like you want to attend to them.
Mm-hmm.
Or even just feeling responsible for people, feeling responsible emotionally, like if anyone needed help or if anyone was like doing something you felt like you needed to help them on their way to finding out, you know. And I think for me, this year has been a big exercise in sort of staying clear in like what's me and like what's this truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone comes into my sphere, being clear that like coming out of my truth or coming out of
Mm-hmm.
what I'm up to isn't going to help. So like, like even though it seems like helping. So
Yeah.
like, I've had a situation where someone um did something that like, I think normally I would try to like help them understand like what happened and walk through the scenario and everything with that person. And instead I'm like, like that's for you to figure out,
Yeah.
on your own. And actually, like I'm gonna stay here with myself. Um, and I'm interested in to see what that person does and with their life and like what they learn from this or if they don't learn from this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's a big difference of just like protecting your energy doesn't mean you're defending.
Right.
It's like you can protect and make sure like folks that you don't want to have access to your energy or to your life aren't
Mm-hmm.
accessing your energy in your life at the same time where you're not being defensive or like actively um, defending. And I think defensive too, like it really applies more in like when people you're already in connection with, right? Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
you're already in an intimate or some kind of relationship with someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's when defensiveness, um, when it comes up, it's really not useful because you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to stay in connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to stay in connection and stay in conversation, the defensiveness is the block between you and that other person. But
Totally.
if you're not trying to stay in connection with someone, and if it's someone that's just coming through your life, um, and it's a harmful interaction, then, like protection or whatever it is, like you could call it defensiveness, but I think it feels more to me like protection is actually
Mm-hmm.
very practical. And it doesn't have to, like I've heard in like this one astrologer who we both know talk about like a lot of spiritual circles talk about being open
Mm-hmm.
a lot, as being like the ultimate spiritual thing.
Yeah,
But
be
actually,
unmoved at all times.
yeah,
If someone throws things at you or insults you, just stay there and like take it, or I don't know. Ooh.
yeah, yeah, and being open to everyone. And actually, that's not what most traditions speak about. There are times to be closed. There are times and like we open the ceremony and we close the ceremony. We open the temple doors and we close the temple doors. And there are times when it's appropriate to be open to people, and it's times when where it's appropriate to be closed, because those are not, relationships that are appropriate to connect in that way with. And so it's like, I think that's a lot of what I've learned more of this year in just a very practical human way is like, as someone who's moved in a very open way,
Mm-hmm.
not working for a lot of my life, how to like get more um, practical about the nitty-gritty of when to protect, when to
Mm-hmm.
be open or to open more into deeper
Mm-hmm.
intimacy with someone. And that deeper sense of trust and intimacy in the relationships that are the right ones to invest that way, and then the ones that are actually where you need more protection or more um, of a sense of closing because of what they're
Yeah, because I mean, it can totally, I can absolutely see how it can sound totally like contradictory to someone listening.
yeah.
Like, what do you mean? You talk about undefended, being undefended, and here you're talking about protecting yourself, and it's like, well, but actually, and it is hard to convey. Actually, it's actually because in a direct kind of experience, it's sort of kind of simple, you know. It's kind of like you said, pragmatic and sort of practical. You know, it's not it's not actually it doesn't feel contradictory at all. And but I do remember I remember there was a situation as I was going through my like very intense awakenings, a certain stage, and there's like so I was really my body felt transparent, like, you know what I mean, like I felt like I just really couldn't be around certain people, especially speaking a certain way, like very forceful or kind of like, you know, like at you, because it was literally moving right through me. And like my nervous system was like, "Whoa," you know. And I remember there's a moment when, thankfully, like, you know, I'm so grateful for the teachers that I met exactly when I was meant to meet them, because there was a point at which I was actually in conversation with someone really, really close to me, a family member. And they sort of started being very like agitated and sort of like, you know, in a way that to my body, I know what they didn't mean it that way, but to my body in that moment, it literally felt like assault, right? And but what the topic that we were exploring with the teacher within the group online at the time was exactly that. She refers to it openness. You know, you can call it undefendedness. You can, you know, there's different words to everybody will have their kind of word that resonates with them the most. And I really was at the time, I definitely didn't understand what that meant yet. You know, like it didn't actually sink in you know, and I remember just bursting into tears and telling her about this situation because I actually had to hang up the phone. Like I just managed to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this, you know, and I had to hang up the phone. But to hang up the phone on this particular person, it was like, I've never done that. And there was like a whole guilt that came with that and all sorts of things. And I remember talking to this teacher about this and saying, but you know, I was like, and I was really trying to stay in my openness, but like I really couldn't, you know, I couldn't just take it, you know, like I mean, I was just like in such distress. And she just lovingly looked at me and she's like, but that's not what we're
That's not
talking
it.
about here. It's like you are
Yeah.
not, the openness is not that you just sit there and enjoy this and you just do what's best for you in the moment. And if like you're feeling that your nervous system is not taking it, then the openness includes the fact that you can't deal with it in that moment. And so,
Mhm.
you know, you say sorry, but like I can't take it, you know. So but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I completely relate to how confusing that can be and
Totally.
how it can sound so contradictory versus then when it's sort of like directly kind of intimately sort of, I don't know, understood, that then it it just makes sense. It's like you said, there's a total pragmatic, practical aspect to it that also quite literally has to do with a kind of self-care. I know that this is like the word that probably
Yeah,
people in non-dual circles will be like, what self-care? That sounds like new age shit or
right. Well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that's important too, because we keep talking about like, I guess the way we're orienting towards this stuff is we're inhabiting our humanness. We're talking about being embodied, being a human being, and not being in the transcendent. So for folks who are just talking about transcending the body and the openness does transcend any situation, like if someone's like, yeah, like, yelling at you on the phone, or if like literally you're being attacked physically, and you're like, you just stay open and you stay present or whatever. And that
And
means,
try to be non-reactive.
yeah, and not be reactive, or not have any fear or whatever the thing is, that that's a different orientation. And if for people who like that's their path, like you can take that path. I think just like maybe to help understand like why it's confusing is because some people are teaching and speaking from that transcendent place. So they
Mhm.
really do mean like open to everything without inhabiting your humanity, without like being in your human body, without recognizing actually the human body has very natural responses, like fear to like an animal attacking you. Like that is not something you can deprogram from your body. That's like
Anger to set the boundary and be assertive, for example, kind of anger, the healthy sort
right.
of, yeah.
Yeah, but if you're in that transcendent spiritual dimension and you stay there, like you don't feel that stuff in your body because you're not actually inhabiting your body. So I also understand that perspective of like, oh, there is no fear, there is no anger, there is no reactivity, because I've been there too, where you're in a space where you believe that and you think that's the truth. And
Yep.
I think what you and I have both learned through this process is that is a truth. Like again, talking about like the dualities and the opposing truths, like that is a truth if you choose not to embody in this life, if you're trying to come out of the body. But if you own this human body in sense that you're inhabiting it, you're living in your everyday, you're in the world, you are going to feel that reactivity. You are going to feel anger. You are going to feel
Mm.
fear, because as soon as you inhabit the body and you start embodying, all of the ancestral, ancient like memory in your body is there, and all the trauma and all the things. And those aren't things you can just escape or like that get fixed when you like shift into no self, or like that, like those things don't just like magically disappear, because the body is its own
Yep.
like intelligence.
Mm.
And I don't know, I guess for me, because the body is so attuned to intuition, it feels like in a sense the body is one of the highest like intelligences that we like have to tune into this, right? And I think to even just be present with things, and a lot of people talk about that, but that also I think there is like confusing messages out there about, okay, we're supposed to be present, we're supposed to be breathing in our bellies and like sitting and like doing our body scans, but we're not supposed to be reactive, or we're not supposed to like feel strong emotions, and we're not supposed to, and I definitely felt that like from all the different teachings that
Totally.
I came across. And I think what you and I have learned, at least through our experiences, what we shared is like, no, actually, you feel everything. Like you can feel everything. And it doesn't mean anything about whether or not you're more or less realized or whatever. It's just what you're
Hmm.
feeling. And it's like being able to not judge that, and to be in a space of like, it's okay. Like this is just what it is that unconditional love, or that unconditioned energy. And we can feel that, and you're just, okay, this is okay. Or when someone's with you and you're like, it's okay. You can feel that's what's transcendent. Like it's actually like the okayness of our humanity, like being in the body, is when the transcendent is embodied.
Mm.
When like you're in a fight with your partner or your friend, and then in that moment you're like an acceptance of like of your full humanity.
The shit show.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. That
Yeah.
includes the shit shows. You know, that
Yeah.
like that thing includes the shit shows. It includes, and it's like, I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm literally like giggling inside because I thought I should honestly have like a plaster that I put over my mouth, like when you speak, because I like I just want to burst out to say something. And it's like I just have to like put it out because there's like five things in what you've just said that each one of them resonated. I'm like, I just want to go like, yes. I should have a plaster from now on and just take it off once I know that you're absolutely done. Um, yeah, I to be honest, like I really I'm actually only discovering the truth of what you're speaking of, farther truth to this because I already cannot come. I mean, let's put it this way. I know what it feels like to live detached from the body in the transcendent state.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been there for at least 3 years.
Hmm.
And at some point, it was actually very pleasant experience. You know what I mean? Like it was actually very truthful and very, that's what I was genuinely feeling. Okay. And it was like it felt good. Nobody suffered. I didn't suffer. Nobody suffered as a result of this, you know, and it was like lovely, you know, um, and very much needed, I believe. I mean, very much needed. You know, it was part of the journey. It was there. It happened. You know what I mean? So it's like, I completely understand that. But then it was the transcendent bit was sort of hijacked by the mind. And then it became like literally like when it, again, I'm speaking metaphors, like when the transcendent tried to kind of get down into the body, it was resisted. And that from then on, I literally lived as though I was cut off from my body. And then the transcendent wasn't actually even transcendent. It was more like the transcendent became like a hiding place,
Hmm.
you know, like a resistance, actually. You know, it was like a
Resistance to
resistance.
the body. Yeah.
Resistance to the body, resistance to, oh boy. But a lot of that, again, I see the innocence of that too, because I just didn't know any better. I mean, there was just so much, I didn't have a reference point. I had no idea what was going on. I just know that there was so much coming up to the surface in the body, especially like the painful memories, sensate all sorts of, you know, uncomfortable sensations. And I was in a constant resistant mode to this, but I didn't know that at the time. Like I can totally see it now. And I suffered greatly, you know. And then I just became more and more numb. I just became more and more with time. You know, this is when I lost the compassion. Like there's a period of time I had zero compassion, Sarah, you know.
Mhm.
I literally like would listen to people sharing wholeheartedly what was going on with them, and I would just like roll my eyes on the inside, you know? It's like, oh my God, can't you just see how you're just lost in the story? Or like, you know what, you know what I mean? Like, but
Yeah.
again, it was because I didn't have kindness to even myself. So how could
Hmm.
I give that kindness to, you know what I mean? I was suppressing my own emotions. How could I be welcoming to other people's emotions? You know what I mean? So it's, and it was honestly one of the worst periods of my life to live that way. It was suffocating and I was suffering all the time. So here I was kind of having realized something, you know, transcendent and everything. But on the other hand, I was just like, you know, and then I was dishonest about this. I was hiding the fact that I was suffering in silence, you know, and stuff like that. So so I understand when that happens, and I also recognize the innocence of that, you know. But now, like, having gone through the journey so far, it's like I honestly cannot comprehend how body can be excluded from this process, because to me it's quite literally where all the action is happening. And in many ways, I'm seeing now that awakening is kind of like a biological process in many ways as well, like on that level of the body. And I've not, you've done like energy work, and I think we chatted about that in one of our conversations.
Yeah.
Maybe I can link it to it. I've never done any of that kind of stuff. And I can absolutely see now how people who have done a lot of like energy work, body work, somatic stuff, when awakening happens, it can be a much more subtle and kind of more I can totally see that why that happens. Whereas I've never done anything like that. And it's only now, after all the realizations and shifts and everything, that life literally is pulling me in a direction that honestly, even 2 months ago, I would have never thought I'm gonna even go in that direction, which is like the fascia release. And I've had only 2 sessions now, and wow, like I've already known that body keeps the score. I've already known that this is because I've been through the very energetic, powerful process as well, alongside the sort of perceptual shift. But this is like next level. Wow, you know what I mean? And to me, that just tells me like this is to me why there is no end point for me to this. For as long as we're in this human body, sure, some things come to an end,
Mhm.
right? But like the releasing of what's in the body, and just seeing, like, I didn't go to release anything, okay? I went because I've heard that fascia release is good for injuries. Like, because I have
Uh,
I have two injuries on the same side, and that's how it started. So I wasn't looking to like release anything or heal anything. No, I just went for my injuries, and boy, oh boy, was it a surprise as to what started coming out during this. Um, so to me, the like you, like to me, the body is now like, and also I don't see body as separate from everything that we're talking about, and I don't understand how it is anymore to see it as separate or something to shun or ignore. Like it's just absolutely, I can't actually genuinely remember how that felt to see it that way, or being cut off from it, because it's like all the action, like I said, is happening there at the moment.
yeah, yeah. It's fascinating because it does feel like maybe, and this is just like my broad observation, but it seems like maybe in the past, like the transcendent was just like what people were up to. And that's just kind of like what a lot of religions are about, like literally like a lot of the myths and religious stories are about transcending things or and being above our humanity.
Mm.
Um, and it just feels like we're in a time, and I think about this about like being in our own personal dark nights of the soul or being in a collective dark night of the soul when there's just so much difficulty. You have to reckon with the dark in the body, like when you're just like when your emotions take over, you don't have a choice. Like when you're in deep grief, when you're in deep rage, when that stuff just gets activated, there's no choice. You are in the body, like because there's something happening here, or at least there's the body's being activated, and so to come into the body is what will help, process that. Um, and so it just seems very relevant, and practical
Yeah.
at the time to learn about the body and be in the body, for a lot of folks that I know and communities I'm in. And there's a lot of more conversation about like how do we rest enough to actually be present in our bodies.
Yeah.
Even in a lot of like social justice circles where it's just like actually like maybe what's needed is less activism and more rest. so that we can actually know what our truth is. You know, we actually know where we want to move from, what we want, because everything else feels otherwise. We're in this kind of constant tug of war with our nervous systems.
Yep.
And yeah, and I think it's interesting that I don't know why, but I always chose modalities that were related to the body. For like when I started therapy, I did somatic therapy. So it was like, you know, I did like 3 or 4 years of working with somatic therapists where instead of talking about the problems or whatever was coming up, she would have me like tune in to where it was in the body. And it felt
Beautiful.
frustrating at sometimes, you know, because I'm like, I just wanted like a reflection or an answer or something like that. But
Yes,
she,
yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's like, yeah. But she would just bring me back to the body and then hold this sense of like an unconditional love kind of space where it's like, okay, within that kind of energy, what comes up in the body? And for me, it was like probably a year or two of just release, of just like all the emotions I never had space to feel since I was a kid, you know, because
Yep.
for most of us,
Yep.
we just have never been given that space for our bodies to feel safely. So it's just like, I remember just feeling so frustrated with like more grief, like more, like more sadness. Like, how could that be? Like, it's just that there's so much, especially in, like, I think about a lot of people have been talking about what's the nature of grief. And I know I hear some folks talking about like grief is like love that doesn't have a place to go. It's like when you've lost someone and you no longer are able to pour
Mm-hmm.
love into them, right? Or you go through a breakup and it feels
Mm-hmm.
like that pouring of love into that person, you have nowhere to put it now. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's like this, the grief is like kind of the pooling of that energy that has nowhere to go. So it feels really heavy and it's like on the heart and in the lungs. And it's like kind of like this heaviness to
Mm-hmm.
what would have been love. Like that would have been this like beautiful expression.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to like let it fully flow and like have its expression, for a lot of us is like, I think a lot of people I'm in community with is a big deal because there's a lot of disconnection, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in our personal lives and in our communities,
Mm-hmm.
where there isn't a place for our love to go.
Yeah.
There isn't a sense of like a way to fully express the amount of love we have inside. So there's a lot of grief. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that sense of really holding in a sense like the sacredness of that grief because it really points to how much we love or how much we have the capacity to love or how much we desire to love or be loved,
Mm-hmm.
which can be really like a beautiful and spiritual experience, you know,
Yeah.
um, to really value that. Yeah.
And you really get kind of like, I think once you're not detached, you know, like from your body, cut off from your body, and things are just kind of finally allowed to kind of just be and, you know, move through, then I feel like there's like a default, at least that's been the case here, you know, that like you really have this like the default is the compassion for the humanness. You know what I mean? And for like, you know, I was saying to you in the message that like just randomly, you know, I was sitting and thinking about our connection and our communication and just like seeing your humanness, seeing my humanness, and just I could not feel anything but like love for it, you know, like in all its facets, you know what I mean? Not just the nice bits, you know, but the challenging to the wobbly ones, the sort of, you know what I mean? Like it's yeah, it's just such a it's kind of funny because on the one hand it can be feel a bit challenging and intense or maybe even very intense, but it's so much easier. Like I know it sounds like a contradiction, but it's just like there's something so freeing when things are just allowed to be and move through. And I think one of the things that you said earlier on, which I think speaks to that. It's to me, this is, I go back to it and I keep on kind of repeating this. That to me, this realization is not about the absence of anything as far as human experience. It's just how things are experienced that is very, very different. And one of those things is that they sort of, like I said, move through and are allowed to be. And you spoke earlier about the judgment. I think what's really fallen away is the kind of like the amount of bashing that I used to do of myself for having a particular experience, you know? Like literally kind of like making myself guilty for having a particular experience, you know? Like especially if it was unpleasant, you know, or like whatever. And it really doesn't mean that like you still are accountable, you know? But the kind of bashing that you're almost like punishing yourself. I don't know how to describe it, you know, in a way that was creating even more suffering on top of whatever's going on. Like that has definitely dropped for me, you know, like significantly. And it's only when you started talking about that judgment that I kind of realized like, yeah, that's been a big one for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think well what you're when you're talking about compassion earlier, I thought, the here I go again. The etymology of compassion is it's calm, which is with, and passion, which is suffering. Like to be with the suffering. It's like with the suffering of someone else, right? When you're
Yeah.
compassionate to someone else. And I remember hearing that like it was like 4 or 5 years ago. And I wasn't satisfied because I was like, well, how could compassion be that you're suffering with someone else? Like, I was like,
Yeah.
that doesn't help, right? But then I realized that the deeper I felt my pain, like the deeper I felt my
Mm-hmm.
grief, the deeper I felt my anger, the deeper I felt my resistance, actually, the more you can be with someone suffering,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that is the like inhabiting of the body, which is like none of us want to suffer, right? But if we go deep into our suffering,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like it may be intense, but like to
Yeah.
actually be with that reality of the suffering. Like it's not like you're making shit up. It's like there, like
Yeah. Yeah.
the feelings are there in the
Yeah.
body. We could try to transcend, like be in the transcendent state, but the body's still experiencing this thing regardless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we like actually be with the body and then go into the depth of those painful emotions, then the capacity to be
Yeah.
compassionate is there. Like you were saying, it wasn't there in the transcendent state because you're like literally not in the body enough
Mm-hmm.
to feel and hold that capacity for someone else's feeling or even just connect to it. So you even have that sense of like a connection between an understanding and like a felt sense, like an embodied sense of like, I get you.
Yeah.
Like I've been there too. Like I got it. And it feels like that level of compassion or understanding is also for me has been like the fundamentals of my relationships, like changing over the last handful of years, but especially this year, I felt
Mm-hmm.
like being able to be in that place of like, oh, I do get it. Like when someone makes a mistake or they do something that's harmful, and then I can say like, I get it. Like I've done
Mm-hmm.
that too, and I've been there too. It doesn't mean that I take it or endure it, like we talked
Yeah, of
about.
course. Yeah, 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 yeah,
But the simple getting it
yeah. Yeah.
helps move from a different place, helps you move from, because the compassion could look like a very strong boundary. It
Mm-hmm.
could look like the compassion
Totally.
is like,
Yes.
I get it, and this conversation
And
ends.
no.
And that- Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
And
or
yeah.
yeah. Or I feel like a lot of most of the things that happened this year is like a lot of it was like, I get it, and it seems like we each need to work on our thing and then come back
Mm-hmm.
together in
Mm-hmm.
order for us to move forward or to like have this conversation in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that I wasn't able to do that piece before without more of that embodiment, like more of the sense of like, oh, okay, I can not dismiss you or say like, oh, like you're harmful or this is harmful. Like we can't move on from this. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we
Mm-hmm.
can. We can.
Mm-hmm.
We can move through this. It just depends like how we kind of grow into this or hold it and hold some space for each other to be able to meet each other differently.
Yeah.
And that's a different way of moving when you feel that sense of compassion working in the everyday conversations. Um, so such that like there's just more, in a sense, there's more grace, but in a sense, it's like also just more of a sense of reality. Like
Mm.
this could be moved through because I've moved through it. Like I've made this mistake and I've learned how to do it differently. So maybe this person could too, and um, maybe not, but
Mm-hmm.
open to that if it feels like the right person to open to that next stage of the conversation with. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that like for me it got much kind of because I used to be really judgmental without knowing that I was like in a kind of subtle ways. And by the way, that may still play out in some ways that are like unconscious. Like I'm not even claiming that I'm kind of free of that or anything, by no means. But that's the whole point, is that I've had so many sort of quote unquote fuck ups, and that just by confronting them in myself and acknowledging them in myself left me with no choice but to understand that with other people. You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean that I will put up with something. It doesn't mean that I won't call something out or agree or disagree or something like that. But and I'm not even saying that I'm not judging, okay? Like really, seriously. But so I'm just laughing literally at myself at the moment. But what's changed is that the like I don't set myself apart, from like I can't do that anymore. It's almost like it doesn't like it's the high horse bit that I kind of fallen off from, in that I don't feel better then, is what I'm trying to say. Like if or morally superior because I go through this, or I don't know how to explain this, but it's almost like something has leveled out at some fundamental level when it comes to looking at people. And out of that compassion that we talked about came through, that you understand, but it doesn't mean you will sort of put up with stuff and things like that. So there's definitely that. But there's something else you talked about, and I was like, I forgot to take a note. I think that one of the insights that are kind of related is actually, I've known this already, but I think I got to like really see it even more, the depths of the unconscious. Like, and we chatted about that as well. And sure, like on a conscious level, I can say with certainty certain things are gone, but there's so much that like I can see how so much of the unconscious can make itself known, and how it goes back to also what we were chatting about, which is like if you don't expose yourself to life and different people and different dynamics and different situations, and just stay kind of in your little bubble, surrounded by people who just agree with you and never question you, never call you out, and just on top of that just look up to you and nothing else, how the hell can you know that, it's very easy to assume that there's like nothing else you're ever going to deal with, or like that you're cleared of something. That's been, like I said, I've known that already, but like this year it became even more like, oh my God, I can so see the truth of that, which is one of the reasons why I'm saying that to me the journey is ongoing. You know what I mean? It's not like you can, there's the liberation, but like the liberating continues, and life exposes things. And I think what's also changed, and I noticed that also through our connection, is that there were because we kind of only met, we still kind of only met. And it's so that's why the reason why I'm saying this is like because it's different with like when we have close relationships that we've been already, then things kind of work in a different way. And these are the relationships that I would like, yeah, I'm gonna sit with the discomfort and I'm gonna go through this with this person and like whatever. But we kind of just met. We like, we were not like friends for years or something like that. And it would have been so easy to, like, when we had our moments of just like friction, let's put it this way, it would have been so easy to like say, oh, we don't really know each other that well. And it's like, you're not really in my life. Like, I'm not in your life. Like, let's just avoid this. Like, basically, let's just not. Like, what's the point? Like, I could see so easily how that could have been the case. And I'm so glad that it's not been the case because, like, running into the woods or like letting it just fly and whatever. Um, because, the discomfort is the greatest teacher. It's such a cliche. Honestly, I know it sounds like a cliche, but I've learned this already, but like through this connection, um, and just other situations this year as well. I see it over and over again that actually the willingness to lean into that discomfort, even like it doesn't seem like it's either like doesn't make sense or will it be worth it, like what's the point? You don't even have to see the point, you just see the discomfort and you kind of lean into it because it holds something that wants to be seen. Gosh, I really went on and on, Sarah.
No, I mean, I love that because um, I think the first time that we had this come up where like there was something that came up between us and we were kind of chatting about it after we'd processed a bit. And I realized like, yeah, what like why, for me, I'd have to feel pretty like comfortable or like been in a longer term kind of friendship with someone to be able to bring this up or to like to have this conversation. And I think what was beautiful, yeah, for us in discovering this, like, this collaboration is because we were coming from both really leaning into discomfort, both like leaning into wanting to understand ourselves more and really like uncover the things that were unconscious and the things that
Yeah.
like we genuinely like as we've been having these conversations and recording, we're actually like doing this with each other and other people in our lives that there was a sense of like both like safety, but just knowing that like, even like almost subconsciously, like I can bring this up with you. Even if like you're not like one of my people or whatever, like that
Yes,
I normally
yes.
bring this up with.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like we've talked about with, you know, when people like somehow unconsciously or subconsciously feel comfortable bringing up big emotions around both of us
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
we've sat with big emotions. So there's
Yes.
something like maybe energetically where someone just gets a sense like, oh, you're someone I can share with.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
this is safe here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was just that sense between us too of just like this sense of like, oh, this is safe to share, like even stuff that maybe I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing with other friends because it's
Yeah.
like because there's a capacity to hold and a capacity to like move through and not necessarily it's not like to have, the conversation in the moment, also the capacity to know like actually I can't hold this conversation in this moment. I need time before we come back. All
Yes.
of those
Yeah.
skills, that's a lot of skills really too. Like it's both insight around what it takes to sit with an emotion or sit with something that's triggering, and then an understanding of like the processing and kind of what we were speaking to about like the mud settling and before you get the clarity.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it was beautiful for me like to feel like we could do that and unexpectedly sort of like practice that together as we're talking about this stuff and to really live through that. processing and the unexpected next layers that were coming up for both of us. Maybe also because we had this capacity, right? So it's like
Hmm.
to hold more. And because there's some like big breakthroughs that came out of that, and like things that like this, things that maybe couldn't have come through, yeah, like you said, with our
Mm.
existing friendship networks or communities.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, I feel really grateful, like in this year of moving through a lot of like these kinds of like repair and
Situations.
rupture kind of
Hmm. Hmm.
conversations, just the ability to stay in that conversation and practice being with each other and coming to your truth, but also coming into like holding
Totally.
others and
Yeah.
to come into that deeper understanding of where, like, in meeting each other and the curiosity of that conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, I definitely through our connection, the thing that I think I said to you that I actually think that a lot like the ripple effect of this connection and all our conversations, both the recordings and outside of the recordings, like it's gonna have like a ripple effect. But for me, I mean, I never claimed that I'm not work in progress, especially when it comes to communication. Boy, oh boy, am I. But I think I really got to appreciate how my rushing in, because it's not just interrupting, okay? It's not just because I really have trouble. Like I really work on like not interrupting because my brain works really fast and I get so excited. I just want to like say things. Um, it's not just about that right now. It's actually um it's just becoming clear. So like I'm literally voicing this like for the first time that the value of rushing in. So it's not that it's not just in not interrupting, which is annoying to people, right? In my daily life, believe me. Um, but the value of not rushing also because then you actually hear better and actually the value of asking more questions, which is also in my case related to not rushing because normally, I mean, this is how I work. Like when I go one on one with people, that's actually what I do. Like, like I ask questions, I'm very present, I listen, right? But like with other connections, that not necessarily always happens. But it's like I kind of knew that it's not actually like it sucks in a way, like the way that what that rushing does for people and how even my rushing may not like literally makes people not feel heard, actually. And so for me, that's been like I said, I kind of knew it before, but I think it only sunk in with you. And I think because our communication is so different. So it was actually amazing to meet with the differences because the differences were the things that actually I totally learned from. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Because
Totally.
yeah, so and actually I noticed speaking of my truth, actually when we take that time, like you said, the at least I noticed in myself, like the model settles sort of you take your time, you get clarity as to what your truth is, then actually you don't just say your truth. You're actually, as a result of that, are able to hold somebody else's truth genuinely. Okay? So you don't need someone to agree with you. You don't even need, at least in my case, I don't need them to understand. But I will respect that truth. I will hear it. Okay. And that to me is like even more important. So that's been like, wow, you know what I mean? And it's like just, um, yeah, that's been really, really amazing to see. So I'm really, really grateful to really like see that in that new way, kind of, or more clearly, through this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I also love that it feels like because we're like complements to each other, like I felt like I learned from you
Oh,
when to just blurt out something. Because
no
like
way.
I know, because it actually, I think for me, like I've had the tendency to like, okay, I'm gonna sit with it. I need to like really attune to who I'm talking to, coming from more of like a place of like, let's
Right.
be quiet with it first. And I actually have needed to learn how to just assert and just say and make the mistake and then learn from that process. And that was like one of the first conversations we had where we had like a challenging conversation was I
Mm-hmm.
just kind of blurted something out in a way that I normally wouldn't. And I felt like, in a sense, it felt like inspired by our conversations because
I'm
like
my bad example.
no, not actually at
No,
all.
I'm kidding.
I,
I'm
and
kidding.
that's it, yeah, because I think this is again where like two things can be true at the same time because
Totally.
sometimes and or just like it can be contextual. Sometimes it's best
Mm-hmm.
to just say the thing. Sometimes we need to listen, but also like in both cases we can make the mistake of not
Mm-hmm.
saying the thing or saying the thing and still come out on the other end, learning and growing through it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's not like we have to do the right thing, but it's like
Yeah.
in doing maybe the thing that's a little off or doesn't quite meet the other person, then like how does it help grow? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
for me, I think of it as like in terms of like we've talked about the opposites like in the axes of astrology, but like in terms of the opposite of saying something quickly or like, and even be
Mm-hmm.
reactive,
Mm-hmm.
versus like sitting with something and waiting for that mud to settle. There's strengths in the reactivity when we need to be reactive, when something has happened and we need to
Totally.
respond
Yeah.
quickly, or at least say something quickly. Like I think a lot of us, like, I can think about for myself. Um, for the ways that I grew up and the sort of conditioning I had, I was sort of conditioned to not say things, you know,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
not speak up. And even if like it's an imperfect way of speaking up,
Mm-hmm.
just speaking up and saying like, hey, that wasn't cool or like whatever. And not having the perfect thing to say, but saying something so we have something to work with that's reflective of what feels true. And if you have someone that you're talking to that can hold that and isn't just going to get, into this battle, then it's like there's a beauty to that. And I think I've learned a lot this year about that in particular around
Mm-hmm.
when to just kind of like assert or jump in or whatever. But also like just us literally recording like and you like just starting this series together like just jumping
Yeah.
in,
Uh-huh.
just doing it and just like creating and not needing to really know like and I think we both
Discuss
kind of
it a lot
yeah
beforehand. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I think we both kind of have a tendency to go with the flow in that way, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time like you say I think both of us have like I felt like, I haven't quite created in online in this way before. And like it felt like, partnering up with you was what it took to like actually create something long term and
Yeah.
have something that we could just kind of be ourselves and be more vulnerable about like what's going on that other folks aren't talking about in this kind of non-duality space. And
Yeah.
I feel, yeah, I feel really grateful for I feel like in the growth that I've been able to find in like those other aspects of myself of like being in more of the jumping in and saying
Yes, yes.
that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, that's been great. And yeah, I definitely I mean that bit is like massive for me. Like I can't even underline that because it no longer feels like because for me part of the thing that was going on is like I've always been happy to make adjustments, and go on compromise and everything. Because I mean, come on, like if you want to be in relationships with people, if you're not willing to make any adjustments and things like that, but like I said, it just felt kind of effortless. And the idea often of like having to slow down and really listen, and it kind I realized only recently that it kind of felt like work. to me. And so I was not willing to do this because to me it felt like I'm filtering, like I'm working at it. It's not even authentic, that sort of thing. But there came a point naturally through this communication that we had that actually I saw it felt very natural and good, like it good, authentic. It's not inauthentic. It doesn't feel inauthentic anymore. You know what I mean? So I think it's like you said. I think this is such a well. It also shows me constantly. There's like the dance of the seeming opposites. You know
Yeah.
that I definitely this year saw how much I benefit from discipline, and that when I put things on the list and I said that I will do them, I freaking do them. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that I'm a bit more organized and all sorts of things, which with, Virgo North Node is quite literally like, yeah, because for me, discipline before my entire life, I would say, was like dead. It's like to me, I equated discipline with like no freedom and hard work, and I now see the completely the other way around. You know what I mean? In my case, but it's a dance, is what I'm trying to say. It's actually like, for example, in my life, I see the benefits of discipline and being organized, but like coming to conversations with you without any plan, no chatting even before as to what we're going to talk about. Maybe at the start we did a little bit more, but like then as we went along, we were not deciding anything. We were just meeting and we were just going with the flow. And that was just amazing. So to me, it's like the dance, you know, between this um the discipline and the zero discipline and like the spontaneity and like and I can see um generally speaking how the two perfectly worked together, because I was always on
Yeah.
one or the other extreme, and now I see how these seeming opposites, like I said, can sort of totally coexist, right?
Totally. I feel like I've learned that too through, especially for us having like a weekly conversation.
Uh-huh.
And that, because I think for when I was creating before, I was like, whenever I feel like it, but like to just have it on the calendar. And even for the days that like you or I were like, I don't feel well, like I didn't get sleep last night,
Mm-hmm.
something
Mm-hmm.
happened this week, or whatever it is that like happens in life
Yep.
that somehow when we showed up at our regular time that
Right.
week, we had things to say. And not just things to say, but like things that were really like enlivening. And like the conversation always has felt alive, and
Yeah.
that there is that flow. And that even like I feel like the days where I come in tired or something, by the end of the conversation, I'm leaving like inspired and feeling like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there's things that we really covered or the conversation that we talked about that, you know, there's in just by showing up, just
Mm-hmm.
by having that time, just by like the discipline of like the scheduled time, it does create like the freedom within that time,
Yeah.
whatever to be created. And I think that's something I'm learning too. I know we're both writing books too, so it's
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yes,
being in
yes,
that
yes.
process has been interesting with like having like very structured days and I'm
Oh
gonna
my
write this.
God, Sarah,
And
I had to
then
like totally that had to go.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah, I
same
think I'm gonna
actually.
be some of my friends heard me say like, yeah, it looks like the draft's gonna be finished by, May whatever. Forget about it. Like I would just have to let the book literally dictate when it wants to be written, as opposed to me deciding or whatever, that's when it's gonna happen or that's when it's gonna come out. And actually this year alone like has been like I saw so many things that I wrote originally no longer
Same.
being
And
true.
I feel like even because through our conversations, I feel like we explored a lot of the things that I was writing about.
Mm-hmm.
And now coming out on a different side and being like, that's not how I feel about that anymore. Like,
Yeah.
there's like new insights, and that's okay too. I think there's always going to be a new insight or a new way of seeing. And I
Yes,
think can
totally.
be,
Yeah.
that also to me can be a block to creativity
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, well, tomorrow I'm going to have deeper insights or I'm going to have like better things to
Yes,
say,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
well, but
yeah.
then why not just create the thing now?
Yeah.
Just say like this is what I have to share now and then
Mm.
probably and I hope next year and 10 years from now, I'll have more interesting things to say, but this is what I have to say now, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's probably way more in terms of like the things that, came up for us, even just through our conversation, our connection. But I also hope that through this conversation, we kind of did one of my favorite things to do, which is to just humanize awakening. And I
Yeah.
hope that our conversations kind of contributed to that in some way. If that's all they did, then boy, oh boy, am I grateful. If anything we said helped someone just like embrace their humanness and and just be okay with what is without that like massive judgment about it of how we should be and how enlightened person or awake person should be like and stuff like that. So, and I also hope that I don't know if we managed to do that, but just to show that really um, how unique the journeys are, and how unique, like we can have, like Sarah and I will be honest, we actually found, we were saying that we actually found ourselves on the same page with more things that probably we thought we would initially because we just knew that we were different people, different even the different people we hang out with, different environments, different whatever. So, obviously there will be differences in how I experience certain things, how Sarah experiences things. And I see this as such it's like the greatest thing, that that's actually the case, that there's certain same page things that many people share when it comes to awakening, but then you have this whole human expression and the things that matter and the it's like, I prefer, coffee to matcha latte. I mean, it's like, and it's like with everything else, there will be these preferences on a kind of very human level that will be different and the way we process things and the way we approach things. And I think I see such beauty in this. And so I hope that our conversations contributed to just appreciating the uniqueness of everybody's journey and everybody's unique experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that folks felt maybe a little bit seen in every time that we shared the times that we had mistakes or like
Yeah.
missteps or like just learning and growing and like
Mm.
realizing we didn't know anything anymore and all that stuff that, yeah, I think I'd love to hear and if anyone has anything to share about like what you
Yeah.
like any like insights or yeah, or like any similar experiences or different experiences that you
Yeah.
want to share in the comments. And yeah, and if there's anything that you're taking away from our like series of conversations that we
Mm-hmm.
haven't shared and or just you would like to share with us, that'd be really cool. I feel like
Yeah.
really it's been fun to like also see the comments and respond and
Yeah,
just
really.
hear people moving through their own journeys of like discovering, yeah, like there's this tradition and that thing, but like there's
Mm-hmm.
also just me and like what I'm up to and honoring like our own individual journeys, while still honoring tradition and honoring the things that came before us, but that we're, yeah, able to kind of step a little bit more into our humanity
Yeah.
together in this conversation and learning from each other through all of us contributing. Yeah, and I'd love for folks if you have any like if feedback or ideas about like how you think these kinds of conversations can move forward around like humanness and awakening too.
Mm-hmm.
Maggie and I are going to be ongoing reflecting about that, and I think
Yeah,
that's
and please remember that I leave Sarah's details in the description. So if you want to follow her and in terms of like what she's up to with her channel and the conversations that she'll have, so that's in the description. I might actually leave it in the comments this time because it's more visible that way. Yeah, and please let us know also like if you had any kind of insights this year, like reflections, for you and your own journey in the comments. And also, if perhaps you had some insights, and observations as you were listening, something came up for you to our conversations, that would be great to hear from you. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you,
Thank
Maggie.
you. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.